was a week ago this Friday night. I went home after a really great Simchat Torah service where we spread the whole Torah around and celebrated consecration for our kindergartners, or first graders, or whatever it was. It was a lot of kids. It was a long time ago. It was a different world, actually. Before I went to bed, I saw on my phone that there were some rocket attacks in Israel, and then I went to bed, but rocket attacks in Israel don't really faze me too much because they happen all the time. And Israel has Iron Dome, and when there's rocket attacks, Israel just shoots them down and we move on. I didn't really think twice about it, and then I woke up in the morning and I turned my phone on and I saw the first headline, over 100 kidnapped. And I was just shocked. What? Over 100? It's not possible. The shock over the next few hours and days became much more real when we heard about the total number dead. It was unfathomable at 100. It was unfathomable at 200. It can't be more than that. 1,300? It's not believable. When we heard about the music festival, when we heard about the ISIS-like torture scenes in the Gaza envelope communities that I visit at least once a year, where I know so many people, including some of those who were murdered. Later, there will be time for investigations to figure out how something like this could have happened. I mean, we know that Israel has the best intelligence service in the world, alongside of the CIA, and one of the best armies in the world. How? How could it possibly have happened? It's not possible. I've been there a million times. There are army bases all along the border. They're all aimed right at the Gaza wall. Don't be fooled. This wasn't Hamas. The cameras, the communication systems, the computers were all jammed by a highly sophisticated attack that was most certainly aided by Iran. There's no doubt that the head of the octopus, as Naftali Bennett always argues, is in Tehran. The tentacles reach to Hamas and Hezbollah. The attack happened on October 7th, the birthday of Vladimir Putin. There's no doubt an axis of evil. And how far deep this goes, who knows if we'll ever know. The timing was unbelievable. Israel's concentrated on the northern border. I was just there at the end of June, and we walked along with the army. There's a man on CNN who's on constantly named Jonathan Conricus. Big guy, army spokesman. Just this past June, I spent 2 days with him, walking along the northern border, with him showing us where the Hezbollah outposts were. Everybody thought if something would happen, it would be in the north. After all, that's where Hezbollah is entrenched. That's where Iran's Shiite camp is set up. And the most pressing matter right now, at least until last week, was the Iranian nuclear ambitions. And the first step to war with Iran would be Hezbollah. Israel's also been entrenched in the West Bank. And the Gaza Strip was something nobody was even thinking about because of the terror and the new bases that are coming up in Jenin and some of the other locations. When we left Israel in June, on July 3rd, we were coming back from the American Embassy party for July 4th, and we had to change our route to the airport because the Israelis had an incursion in Jenin because of the huge buildup of terror in the West Bank that was not under the auspices of Hamas or the Palestinian Authority. It's a new branch that's rising. So nobody was really paying attention to Gaza. And then last Saturday. This is the most pain I've ever felt in my life. To me personally, it's even more intense than 9/11 because it doesn't end. Because Israel was so small. Because 9/11 was one day of trauma and then years of PTSD. But in Israel, they don't have PTSD. There's no such thing. Because the trauma's never post. It's always there. The way they died, of course, and one of the most painful aspects, the hostages. Reports today are that the Israelis have found some of those bodies already, some of the hostages, and that they're dead. We don't know where the other ones are, or at least it hasn't been revealed to us. But the manner in which they were taken, those images, will never be removed from our brains as long as we live. Right now, Israel's in war mode. Right now, Israel's in fight mode. If you look on Israeli TV, in the corner, by the emblem of the channel, for each channel it says, Yachad Ninatzeach. Together we will win. We will win. But the cost has already been paid. I imagine that I will mourn this tragedy for the rest of my life. Frankly, I can't imagine right now a day that could possibly go by where I don't see the images of these things that have happened. But right now, I'm in fight mode. Right now, I'm telling all of the people who said that Israel's checkpoints, the separation fences, and the walls are immoral, that they were wrong. That every time a car from Israel has gone into the West Bank or to the Gaza Strip by accident, the Israelis in those cars have been lynched, whether it's quiet in the atmosphere going on in Israel or not. Any time there's been an opportunity to lynch a Jew who accidentally crossed into the West Bank, it happened, and it happened in the most cruel way. And still people say these checkpoints are immoral. Palestinians deserve freedom of movement. That would be nice. But it's a dream world. Right now, I'm looking to my colleagues who have told me for the last 20 years that I'm too radical when it comes to Israel, that I've been wrong because I've been worried about Israel's security, and now I'm ready to tell them, no, you've been wrong because you haven't stood with me while I've been trying to do it. Right now, I want to tell every college administrator in this country, you have allowed atmospheres to boil over on our campuses where our kids are no longer safe at your school, and that has to come to an end. What you have done is immoral. It adds to anti-Semitism in this country, and it has allowed the moral equivalency of what just happened to happen, and it's incomprehensible to anyone who understands morality. God came to Noah, and he said, it's time to destroy evil from this world. This is the Torah portion that we'll read next week. There came a point where after 120 years of God waiting for people to repent God came to Noah and said, up till this point and no more. On Simchat Torah, we finish reading the Torah and then we start again. We finish reading the Torah because it's the time that God buried Moses. And we learn from that example how important it is, ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, to love your neighbor as yourself. And part of that mitzvah is to take care of the dead. That's how the Torah ends. The Torah begins, as far as humanity is concerned, with the story of the Garden of Eden, with God preparing for Adam and Eve everything they could possibly need. The Torah begins and ends with God's example of how we're supposed to take care of each other. That's the message that we're meant to learn on Simchat Torah, so that when we finish the Torah, we can begin again and move forward into a new year, first and foremost on our minds, taking care of each other. But instead of seeing that, we didn't see what happens in the end of the Torah and in the beginning of the Torah. We saw what happens once God gave people a little bit of a chance in this world. And eventually God said, the lawlessness that you've created, has caused me to say, up until here and no more. And that's when the flood came. Those of you who come to Torah study tomorrow will see that the word that God uses for lawlessness, the word that God uses in the Torah to say, these people, besides Noah and his family and the animals on the ark, all need to be wiped out, the word that's used is Hamas. Israel, too, is at an up until here moment. God had no choice when it came to the generation of the flood. Instead of learning about how we're supposed to take care of each other from the beginning of the Torah and the end of the Torah, Hamas taught us the lesson to learn from God's example, to say when it's time to blot out evil from this point forward and no more. Of course, now we see what's going on in Gaza. We know that there are thousands of innocent Palestinians who will be killed. I don't want to see videos like I have over the last few days of Palestinian children bleeding in hospitals with no one to take care of them. I don't want to see Palestinian elderly be killed. I don't know anyone who does. But we know as well that the rules of the game have changed. The world has changed. And what they're saying in Israel is, Ma shaya lo yiyeh. What has been in the past will no longer be. We are dealing with barbaric Nazis. Secretary Austin in Israel today, in a press conference with Prime Minister Netanyahu, said, part of my job in my career was destroying ISIS. Nobody knows ISIS like Secretary Austin, and the mission was to crush ISIS. The world decided that the barbarism of ISIS, the burning of people alive, the putting people in cages, the decapitations had to end. And after Austin saw the pictures that Netanyahu showed him of what happened in the Gaza envelope, he said, Hamas was 100 times more vicious than ISIS ever was. Think about that. After the flood, it happened again. God said after the flood, I'm not going to destroy the whole world, but I will destroy those who live a lawless life. And he came to Abraham and said, there are people who live near where you live, and it's time for them to die. They live in a place called Sodom and Gomorrah. And their evil is so out of control, the way they treat each other and the way they relate to the world, that I can no longer abide by them in this world. And Abraham said what we all want to say. How can you do that? Surely some of them are innocent. What if I can find 50 people? Will you change your mind? And God said, sure. But he couldn't find 50. And he said in chapter 18 of Genesis, what if I find 40? What if I find 30? What if I find 20? What if I find 1? And ultimately, when God had proven to Abraham that there wasn't even one righteous person in Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham went home, God sent his angels, and the cities were destroyed. At the end of chapter 18, God finishes the conversation with Abraham and departs. When Abraham realizes that God's no longer there, that he's no longer experiencing a prophetic vision or receiving any message, he goes home. He goes home because he realizes that the die has been cast and the evildoers will be destroyed. The Torah says in 3 words, V'Avraham shav limakomo, and Abraham returned to his place. We learned from the Kabbalah that Abraham stood for what we call the attribute of chesed, kindness. Each one of our matriarchs and patriarchs represented one particular characteristic, and for Abraham, it was chesed. It was kindness. And that's why, unlike Noah, when God brought the flood, and God said to Noah, it's time to start, it's raining, it's time to get on board, Noah said, all right, let's go. When God told Abraham it's time to kill everybody, Abraham didn't just leave. He said to God, you can't do that. How can you kill the innocent? Something Noah never did. When Abraham saw that God had left and that the die had been cast and that there was no chesed left to give for the evildoers, he turned around, he went home, he took his kindness, and he said, where else can I give my kindness? Like Abraham, Israel too. I don't speak for you, but me too. I'm done with lawlessness. I'm done with Hamas. The die for their destruction has been cast, and we will not miss or mourn the absence of their evil from our world. Instead, like Abraham, we reserve our chesed for the people who are hurting, for our brothers and sisters who are fighting, who are healing, who are mourning, and who are suffering. Abraham left and went home. He took his kindness and he said, if they don't want it, I'll find the people who do. Today we do something that Abraham could only dream of for the future of his people. When Sarah died, Abraham had nowhere to bury her. He had to buy the land because he was a man with no country. When we finish the Avot, our prayer, when we say, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Sarah, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. At the end of that prayer, there's what we call the Chatima, one blessing where we say, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Ve'ezrat Sarah. Bless you, Lord our God, who protects Abraham and shields Sarah. But at the end, we don't say Isaac and Jacob, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah. Why do we say to God, bless We're the children of all of these matriarchs and patriarchs. But at the end, we only say, shield Abraham and Sarah. The answer is because Abraham and Sarah were told, your children will inherit the land of Israel. You won't. You don't have a land. You have no home. You live before 1948. This isn't your land yet. And because you have no land, you need an extra blessing for protection. Abraham could only dream of what the future of his people would be. I thank God, today more than ever, that we live in a time when Jews can defend ourselves, when we can fight back, when a pogrom that, like what happened this past Shabbat, happens, we then don't, like my great-grandparents and my great-grandparents and probably all of your ancestors, or a good bit of them, had to look for a new country to live in because Central and Eastern Europe no longer welcome Jews. We'll mourn this tragedy for the rest of our lives. But at the same time, let us offer thanks that our people are home, in our eternal sacred homeland with its capital in Jerusalem. We are home, we will win, and we are never leaving. Am Yisrael Chai. May this be God's will. Amen.